Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for welcoming me today to talk about positive discipline. I work primarily with children and families and teenagers, and have done a lot of work on helping parents learn how to break some cycles in regard to the way that they were parented and how they would like to parent their children. So we'll talk all about that today. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge that my cultural background might differ from some folks who are listening and present today. So I am white American, and with that comes my own bias and my own understanding of the world. I do have a graduate degree. I process the world through a Western lens or an individualistic perspective. With all of that said, I've dedicated my studies and my career to supporting the health and well-being of future generations through addressing and breaking cycles. And although my ideas about parenting might be slightly different, I do not believe that they are better. I'm just here today to share what I've learned and what I've learned through working with families and through research. So I appreciate you all being here with me today. Okay. So first and foremost, it's very important for me to address how hard parenting is. It is hard work every single day. So I really am grateful that you're all here listening to how we can parent maybe from a different perspective. Parenting is often a reaction to the way that we were parented. It's the way that our parents showed us the ropes, and sometimes that in reflection, we're feeling like maybe we want to do things differently with our own children. However, when you're constantly fighting battles, trying to figure out how to parent from day to day, it is really easy to lose sight of the way that you're really hoping that you can parent. And in high stress moments in particular, it is very common to default back to the way that our parents treated us, even though we really, really desire to break former cycles. So just wanted to put that out there. That's totally normal. It happens to everybody. So today our topic is positive discipline. Because parenting has such an important role in a child's emotional and behavioral development, we do a lot of research and learn about the best ways, from my perspective and the research perspective to parent children. And research does tend to demonstrate that positive reinforcement and the use of something called natural consequences are a more effective approach than punishment. And we'll go through why that is. So throughout the course of this presentation, we're going to explore why and how to implement positive reinforcement at home. And we'll have lots of examples. So this is a graphic that demonstrates 4 really common parenting styles. On the axis that goes up and down, we have the measure of warmth, how warm a parent is, and then in the other direction, it goes from a parent who has really low discipline and instruction to really high discipline and instruction. So in the top corner, we have permissive parenting. And this is a parent that is very warm and is often gives in to their child's wishes, but might be on the more passive side or have minimal guidance to offer. In the bottom corner on the left, we have a neglectful parent, and this is one that is neither warm nor providing any discipline or instruction. So that would be somebody that's detached from their child's feelings and behaviors and who is not involved in their care. On the bottom right, we have authoritarian. This is what you think of when you think of a very strict and rigid parent. So that is somebody that is restrictive, is inflexible, is not interested in the child's opinions at all, and has really harsh punishments without the warmth. And sort of the gold standard, or what we strive for, is to be authoritative parents. So this is a parent that is really warm, that is, demonstrating how much they care for their child while also holding firm boundaries with clear roles that they're willing to collaborate with their child. This is a parent who is understanding, but also firm. I'm gonna pause at the next visual. for a few seconds. All right. It's also important to note that a child's need for safety is not limited to physical safety. So if we look at this graphic, this is a common way to understand what children need in order to get to the peak of the pyramid, which is called self-actualization. What that means is a child who is healthy, who is emotionally and mentally strong. And that happens when all of these needs towards the bottom of the pyramid get met. So we have physiological needs like food and shelter. The next level would be physical safety. And then anything above that is the hard work that parents do of making sure that their child is feeling loved and that they have a place to belong, building up their self-esteem, and eventually they reach a level of self-actualization. So within this pyramid, an important piece is structure, discipline, and a child's ability to know what to expect. Those are all really fundamental needs that help children feel safe and cared for. I'll pause here for a few seconds. Now we're going to discuss why punishment is understood as falling short in terms of parenting. So punishment tends to suppress behavior, but it doesn't teach children alternatives. So for example, if a child who is yelled at for interrupting may stop, but they may not learn to wait their turn. So we'll talk about what the alternative to punishment is. Another reason that punishment may not be the best approach is that it increases fear, anxiety, or aggression in children. So research basically demonstrates that harsh punishment like yelling or spanking tends to increase anxiety, depression, and aggression in children. There is also the factor that punishment may damage the parent-child relationship. Oftentimes, if children are only exposed to punishment, they become more secretive or resentful. So they learn to hide their behaviors, but maybe they're not learning an alternative like you would hope that they would. And then it also doesn't work well in the long run, because as soon as the threat of punishment is removed, the behavior often returns. So here's a little bit more on how punishment can impact the parent-child attachment. So when you rely on punishment, it creates fear rather than creating trust. And because of that, children are behaving out of fear rather than understanding genuinely what is right and what is wrong. It also reduces the possibility for open communication. Kids might, again, become more secretive. They might decide to avoid discussing mistakes with parents because they're afraid of a punishment, as opposed to feeling like their parent is a safe person to confide in. Punishment can also weaken emotional security. As we talked about with that pyramid visual, children really thrive in environments where they feel safe rather than scared. Next, it can lead to emotional distancing. So, children who are exposed to repeated harsh punishments might pull away from their parents over the course of their lives. So now we're going to shift into talking about positive discipline, which is the alternative. So one thing I want to debunk is that positive discipline doesn't mean that you're positive all the time or that you're always giving in to what your child wants. In fact, it means having a combination of being kind and being firm at the same time. So it's that authoritarian type parenting style. So in order to be firm and kind at the same time, that requires showing empathy while also maintaining your boundaries. So an example of this would be to say something along like, I know you're upset, but hitting is not okay. Let's find another way to express your feelings. Next, positive discipline focuses on making connection with your child before you correct them. This helps to strengthen your relationship with your child, which actually helps to foster their ability to cooperate with you more. So an example here would be spending quality one-on-one time to build trust and security with your child. Next, an important aspect of positive discipline is to encourage your child to learn how to problem solve and to take responsibility. So instead of leaning on a punishment, when you involve your child in understanding right from wrong, this helps them to learn to find their solutions rather than avoiding something for fear of punishment. An example of how you can include your child is to ask them, what do you think that we can do to fix this situation together? That's going to make them feel really supported and give them some ability to feel like they're responsible for making something right. The next one is to use natural and logical consequences, which we'll talk about more in the next slides. So the idea here is to try to pick consequences that are related to whatever behavior you're trying to correct. And we also want to make sure that consequences are respectful and reasonable rather than defaulting to that harsh discipline or punishment. So an example here is if a child refuses to wear a coat, then they're going to feel cold at school. So they're, rather than being yelled at about the coat, they're going to experience firsthand what it means when I don't bring my coat, I'm cold. So they learn, in the future that it's important to bring your coat. Fifth, it is really important as parents to do your best to try to model the behavior that you want to see. So this means giving your child an example by acting upon the behavior that you want them to do. Children learn by watching, especially their parents and teachers. So it can be really important to demonstrate how to be patient, kind, and respectful. This might look like speaking calmly and respectfully, even when you're feeling frustrated. That way they have an idea of how they can do that too. This next slide goes over things to consider when you're developing consequences for your child's actions in a way that is proactive, but it's also mindful of your relationship and creating a sense of safety with your child. So a way that we can start to develop a foundation of feeling safe with your child is to be really proactive in finding ways to help your child feel like they're important to you, that they belong in your family, that you care about them. So that's one. So that can be accomplished through scheduling one-on-one attention with them, that you don't reschedule, or that you don't, let's say if you offer the opportunity to go out to ice cream with your child, that needs to be something that you hold very important so that they can know they can rely on that one-on-one attention. If something were to come up, it's important to address it and say, our ice cream date is so important to me. I'm sorry we can't go today, but we will go on Sunday. It's also important during those moments to try your best to be fully present with them. So maybe putting like the smartphone away and really being there with your child in the moment, and having your child able to pick the activity that they'd like to share with you. And then finally, when you are developing fair and effective consequences, these are the 5 R's that help us figure out what kinds of consequences are appropriate. So they should be respectful, so they shouldn't harm their body or hurt. They should be really directly related to the behavior that you're trying to change. They should be reasonable in duration. So maybe, not you're grounded for a month because you did X, Y, and Z. Instead, you're going to lose out on a privilege for the next hour or whatever it may be. Something that should be revealed in advance as much as possible. So this means, letting your child know if I find out that you're looking at your phone and when you're supposed to be sleeping, there will be a consequence, so that they're actively making their choices based on having advance notice of what's going to happen. And then it's also important for them to repeat the consequence back to you so that you're sure that they understand. I'm going to pause here for a few moments. Another really important thing that I wanted to mention is how powerful praise can be. When it feels like you're constantly correcting your child, it's important to keep in mind that they're feeling like they're always being corrected. There's always something that they're doing wrong. So I really wanted to highly encourage parents to find some neutral moments where you can provide praise. This can be as simple as noticing when a child is being patient in a line, or noticing when they are taking good care of their toys, or when they're speaking to you with kindness. You can say something like, I really love how patient you're being, or making a personality-based compliment like, wow, you're so funny, I really love being with you. That's another way to build a sense of safety and belonging with your child. And I think it'll make parents feel good as well. Okay, we are now going to talk about positive reinforcement. So research really highlights how effective positive reinforcement can be, especially compared to punishment. So positive reinforcement encourages good behavior by rewarding it. So this doesn't mean buy a toy for your child every time they do something well. It can be as simple as praising a child for sharing, because that helps them build confidence. When I share, my parent feels proud of me, and it makes it more likely for them to want to share in the future, for example. Another way that positive reinforcement is really effective and valuable is that it creates motivation through a child's brain chemistry. So when a child feels praised, there's a feel-good chemical called dopamine in their brain that gets released. And when that's released, it makes them want to seek out more opportunities to be reinforced by their parents. Positive reinforcement is also a great way of building confidence and emotional well-being in your child. Encouragement really helps children to develop self-esteem and resilience over time. Makes them feel like they're good and they are able to make good choices, and wanting to continue to seek out positive attention from their parents. And it also just helps to strengthen the parent-child bond. As you can imagine, when someone focuses on a positive behavior, it makes you feel safe and supported and valued. So here are some ways that you can use positive reinforcement. First would be using praise and encouragement. So this can be a statement like saying, great job putting away your toys, rather than saying something like, oh, finally you cleaned up. You can also use reward systems. This is more related for younger children. You can use things like sticker charts, like if you get your homework done, you get a sticker, using literal rewards in the moment, and maybe they earn a prize or something once they get 5 stickers. And for older kids, this would probably look like extra privileges. So, if you're able to get your English paper turned in, then you can be out until 8:30 or something. Or you can have another hour of screen time. Another way is to model the behavior that you would like to see. So this means showing kindness to your children, being patient with them, and being responsible, and that helps them want to be that way as well. Another great way is to have very clear expectations, and it can be helpful to explain exactly what is expected of your child rather than reacting when they don't do something that you were hoping that they would do. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 2 different versions of consequences that can be really helpful, and I'm going to help distinguish between the 2. So natural consequences are the outcomes that happen as a direct result of a child's actions. This happens without any intervention from a parent or adult. Natural consequences help children learn from experience and take responsibility for their choices. I'll give you some examples in the following slides. Logical consequences are those that are really directly related to a child's behavior, and the function of a logical consequence is to help them understand the impact of their actions. This is different than punishment because logical consequences are fair, they're respectful, and they help children learn responsibility. So I'm going to go through some examples of natural consequences and then logical consequences for children of different age ranges. So instead of punishment, here are some ways that you can allow natural consequences that will teach your child lessons. So the example we used before is if a child refuses to bring a coat to school, they will feel cold at school, and they're going to learn how to dress appropriately in the future. For an older child, if a child forgets their homework and they don't turn it in, they're going to experience at school that they have to face the teacher and explain to the teacher where their homework assignment is and make a plan to turn it in at a later date, which helps them to learn responsibility for their homework assignments. And then with teenagers, something like if they spend all of their money, they're going to learn how to budget, and they're going to learn how to what they need to do in the future so that they can afford what they'd like. Logical consequences are an additional strategy that parents choose consequences that fit the behavior. So, for example, if a child were to take money from their sister's wallet, the logical consequence would be they need to return that money, they need to make an apology to their sister, and maybe go out of their way to repair the trust in some way. Another example of a logical consequence would be if let's say a teen skips class, that means they're going to spend their weekend working on missed assignments. So these are things that are fair, they make sense, and the purpose of them is to help the child learn what to do in the future. So now we're going to talk through some specific scenarios and how we can match consequences to the behavior. An example here is if your child or teen is up late using their device, your natural instinct might be, that's it, you're not going to have your phone for a week. As we discussed before, it's important for consequences to kind of like fit the behavior and maybe not be overly long. So a natural consequence here would be that your child's going to feel tired all day at school the next day because they didn't plan ahead and they didn't know that it's time to put my phone away. And then the logical consequence would be to explain to your child, if you can't be responsible with your phone, I'm going to have to take it away at bedtime. This is something that's fair, and it gives them the opportunity to learn and to make a better choice. Another example is, say your child takes $20 from your wallet. Your natural instinct might be to take away something really important to them because you're really hurt that they would steal from you. So you might say something like, you're not going to your friend's birthday party next weekend. A natural consequence would be that your child doesn't get to buy their friend a gift because they spent that money without asking. And a logical consequence would be to let them know, you're going to need to earn my trust back, and you're going to need to do maybe some chores to earn that $20 back as well. This is teaching them, I can't just get away with taking money. Now I have to prove that I am responsible to my parent. It's directly related. Another example is maybe a child pushes their sibling down. That might feel really frustrating in the moment as a parent when you're just trying to get through the day. So your instinct might be to say, to go to your room for the rest of the night. A natural consequence would be that their sibling no longer wants to play with them, and everyone is feeling really upset. And a logical consequence would be to explain to your child that they're not making safe choices, so they need to go take a break. In this example, when a child pushes another child down, they're likely not feeling calm and they're likely very upset. So it can help to incorporate a way to calm them down. So, you go get calm, do what you need to do, take your deep breaths, listen to music if you have to. And when you're calm, you owe your sister an apology. So when you are approaching using positive reinforcement and consequences, it can be tricky to balance these things. So here are some ways to kind of think through when to use positive reinforcement and when to use consequences. So reinforcement is good to use when you're in trying to encourage a good habit. So an example here is, if you notice that your child does the chores that you ask them to do, you would thank them for that. You would say, great work. I'm so proud of you for doing your chores, because you want to increase that behavior. You want that behavior to grow. Natural consequences are good for when you're trying to teach responsibility. So for example, if you forget your lunch, that means that you're going to be hungry that day at school. So then in the future, if I don't want to be hungry at school, I have to grab my lunchbox. It's important, of course, if there's a safety risk, then we don't allow natural consequences. So if a child is running into traffic, obviously we're not going to allow the natural consequence of a car, hitting them or something terrible like that. So that's when we need to intervene and hold their hand. Or if a child is being aggressive, we're not going to allow that natural consequence of another child getting hurt. So those are moments when we do intervene. Wanted to talk about a misconception about positive parenting. So positive discipline is not, it's neither punitive or permissive. Instead, positive discipline is viewed as a way to train or guide your child rather than punish them. So I think oftentimes people feel like the word positive parenting or positive discipline feels like you're being really loose with the rules or being very flexible. But in reality, it's finding ways to be respectful to your child and incorporate them in the learning process that is the goal of discipline, rather than disciplining from a place of fear. So in moments that are bound to come up where maybe you lose patience and you revert back to a way that maybe you were parented, it is very valuable to address those moments through what we call repair. So one way to do that is to let your child know how much you love them, let them know that you're trying your best. It can be helpful to explain to them your own experience. So an example here would be to say, I'm really sorry for yelling. When I was young, my parents always yelled. I'll try harder next time, and I really appreciate your patience while I work on breaking this cycle. I think having that kind of clear communication about your goals as a parent and what you're trying to do, and also showing them that you're human and that everybody makes mistakes and has hard days, can be another way to demonstrate to them how they can communicate in a way that's respectful too. Also, it's important to have as much self-compassion for yourself as possible, because breaking cycles is very hard work. So, don't feel discouraged in these moments where you might shout or do something that you don't want to do. Your child will be able to understand through having these types of conversations and repairing your relationship in that way. I'm going to pause here for a few moments. All right. So some key takeaways from this presentation are that punishment is often ineffective and it can cause harm. On the other hand, positive reinforcement can build long-term positive behaviors. Natural consequences teach responsibility without damaging your relationship. Logical consequences are fair and they uphold boundaries. And doing your best to take a balanced approach makes for a healthier and happier family dynamic.